5.76% of our GDP is orthopedic care.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's huge.
That's a much bigger percentage than I realized.
You're smart enough to understand it's all about what you do beforehand. In health, the problem that we see, and this is why we're doing a pilot, is you have like the hospitals, they don't understand anything about nutrition and diet. They don't coach you on anything. You have like the health and wellness. There's no connection between them. So we're trying to create some
hospital food, right? Hospital food is
like Jello after your wife delivers. You're like, get this out of here.
Jello and like mashed potatoes and bread, and you're like, what are you doing?
And I'm slightly obsessed, if you ask my wife, with all this stuff.
You are? Okay, cool.
Oh my gosh.
Well, then we'll go into that a little bit. Before I forget though, what is your title? What should I introduce you?
I'm the co-founder and president.
Co-founder and president, and is it
MD
Moen?
Direct.
How do you say your last name?
Moen. Yeah, like
Moen.
the faucet,
Okay,
Moen.
Yeah, I was going to say by
No
Moen,
relation,
or
but
what's that? By Moen, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I immediately thought.
Yep. So no relation to the family, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, it's
the Fawcett dynasty of the Moens.
Oh
right?
man, I think there'd be a little different conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the MD Direct is the company, and that's the name.
Yeah. So co-founder, president, MD Direct.
I'll talk about my partner, Dr. Burt, too, a little bit. Okay. I think that matters of who he is, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. I can go into the detail, but I am obsessed with individual performance. Like,
cool, man.
Looking at my metrics and trying to figure out what to do. And diet, I've tried so many diets. My mom was like celiac when she was like 40.
Okay.
So we're celiac, can tell by my hair, but it is like an inflammatory disease, and my dad's a doctor, so we like figured this out 20 years ago, and so we've stopped eating gluten for the longest time.
Okay.
And like weight dropped off my wife when she stopped going.
Oh yeah.
So it's like we're seeing the actual impacts.
Celiac, I have a friend who's
gluten free.
Yeah, but is it near like what you might say? It's not complete ketogenic diet, is it?
It's very close.
It's very close.
Because the ketogenic diet is basically the best like vehicle to do celiac disease, which is just you can eat those same foods.
Okay.
So celiac is just wheat. Gluten, wheat.
Yeah.
So it's if you have flour in anything, it gets you. You can
tell.
So
when you go to a restaurant, do you say, hey, it's sometimes they ask, is it a preference or it's an allergy? Sure. You say it's definitely an allergy, right? Yeah. So you have to be celiac, very clear.
Very clear.
Yeah. Now, but is that hereditary? You mentioned that your parents have, so it's passed down.
We have a belief in our family that Scandinavians have a much higher propensity for for being gluten-free or having celiac disease.
What do you think that?
We have a theory, this is not proven at all, that we didn't eat this type of processed wheat, our generation. So when we're fishing, hunting, and eating vegetables is when you look at Sweden and Norway, that's kind of what the food source was.
Yeah.
So we weren't made for a refined, and like Swedish men are balding quicker. And so it's an inflammatory disease. So you can see the hair loss is.
So that's a true statement. Okay.
I learned that like way too late, unfortunately. but that's something that we've spent a lot of time figuring out. Like my son, who's at 18 months, he had a rash, a reaction to some pork that we learned there was some celiac in there. So we have had to change his whole diet. And that's like the first time it's a sign.
With steak and eggs, pretty much?
Pretty much.
What's funny is I joke. I mean, that's basically what I'm very near a carnivore diet. Yeah. Very, very near. So, I mean, I'm not 100% adherent. I don't get too obsessed over it. But, this morning I had a ribeye. Yesterday I had, I think, steak and eggs, and then a couple hamburger patties with cheese on them. I mean, because I have found, I've never really actually tested it, but from an inflammatory standpoint, a bloating standpoint, a water retention, a feel, energy, etc.
It matters.
If I get as close as I get to zero carb, I'll do some fruit and stuff sometimes when I feel like my blood sugar's crashing.
Yes.
But that seems to be the optimized diet for me at my age. And
I think it's personal to every single person.
Yeah, it is.
Like I think everybody has to make a decision. It's really, how do you feel? That's what in my personal self, that's what I figured out. I take, what did I eat? Was I feeling good? If I was eating all this food and I was like tired in the afternoon or
crashing,
trying to crash, then I'd translate that back to, what did I eat? Yeah. That's typically for me what the problem is.
Well, I think and I assume we're ready to go, right, Nathan? Yeah. If most people started with that basic question of, I feel like crap, what did I eat? You could probably answer 80-90% of your problems. You could solve them that way.
And that's what I figured out personally. And it's my family. We've all been big into this. So that's the question we all ask ourselves.
Okay.
And it's hard because
So
everybody's
when you're being
thinking,
grumpy with your wife, she goes, "What did you eat,
she's
Sam?
like, did you go out to eat?"
Yeah.
And like,
Did you have X, Y, or Z? Because you're acting like a jerk right
Yep.
now. Yeah, you're
Yep.
hangry.
Yep. There's positives and negatives to it.
Yeah,
but
I understand.
you can't, like, when you're looking at like a piece of pizza that's gluten free and you're just hungry.
Yeah.
Or not gluten free. You have started to learn, like, I have to choose to do this, and I'm going to pay for it later.
Well, that is literally that is a weird, and we'll start the podcast right after this.
No worries.
That is a weird thing as human beings where, oh, that looks so good, it's going to taste so good, and you go, that 30 seconds of sort of mouthfeel and pleasure is going to be followed by hours and hours of crap, right? Of feeling like crap, but we'll still make that choice.
I know. We're designed to make that choice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're not quite caught up evolutionarily to make that choice. We're still back. We still got that brain that has not evolved, the lizard brain, and we're just.
Well, it kind of makes it fun though, because every day you have to reinforce if let's say you could just flip a switch and you never made a bad choice again. Would that be fun though? Because there's no battle, there's no overcoming, there's no obstacle. Obstacle is the way, right? If there is no obstacle in my way, then everything's just blah.
Yeah, I know.
No, we're getting way too deep.
That's fine. I love it. I'm glad this is my stuff. This is what I do.
Right.
So.
Well, let's go ahead and go in the podcast. Maybe we'll include some of it. So I'm here with Sam Moen. You are the co-founder and president of MD Direct. How you doing, Sam?
Doing well. I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming here. And I didn't ask. I want to ask on the podcast, the pin that's on your lapel. What is that? It's a tractor, right?
Yeah. So my son is huge into tractors. Okay. And so I wore this just so he would know and can see that we're into tractors. And my family, at a wedding one time, we have a lot of family members, and my mom was like, "How do I identify you?" So we all wore pins and then bow ties. And so she was like, "Hey, those are my sons." Okay. So it's really easy for her to identify who we were. And then we kind of just went with it.
That's awesome. So, my son, we read this little book. It's like something on Grandpa's farm. And it's about a tractor and the generations, the tractor's obviously decrepit and rusting now, but then it goes back and they tell the story of Grandpa growing up on the farm, and he loves that stuff. So
tractors are a huge thing right now in my household. So I just figured I'd go with it today.
We're mostly into fire trucks and police cars right now, but that's the phase we're going through.
I can see that.
So the 3-year-old. But all right, Sam. So what are we going to talk about today? I don't want to go too deep because we want to get your story first, but let's at least state what we're doing here and what we're going to talk about with MD Direct. So give me a little high-level summary of what the episode will be like. Yeah.
So I think kind of the founding story of MD Direct, what we really discovered in taking care of people. So I worked on the health system side, the provider side, and what we saw was there's a huge disconnect between what health systems were doing and what employees were getting and being delivered. And so what we thought of is, let's create a vehicle which increases the demand, so the need for a better health system on the employee side so that the providers would respond.
Okay.
So value-based care is attempting to do that, and we figured out what works and what doesn't work. And the reason why we've chosen MSK and orthopedics is it is the biggest pain point for an employer-aged patient. So anybody under the age of 65, it's the number one spend item in terms of a diagnosis.
Really?
So it is 5.76% of our GDP is orthopedic care.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's huge.
That's a much bigger percentage than I realized.
And if you look at claims, so we do a bunch of claims analysis. If employer says, we got $1 million, it can be anywhere from 13 to 25%.
Okay.
Of your spend is that one category. That is the largest category. So there's a lot of, drugs, and there's a lot of different needs, but at the one diagnosis spending category, that is by far the largest. The next closest is the circulatory system, and then you have cancer, which is they're around 3%.
Okay.
So it's significantly bigger.
Well, then I would presume that's obviously because just the prevalence of, musculoskeletal injuries, whether that's muscle tissue, that's joints, that's bone injuries, things like that. Obviously they happen more often than a cancer.
Totally.
But also the cost you're saying is obviously really, really high as well.
The cost is high, and it's getting higher. And I think that's why we have noticed a trend, and we're starting to say, hey, that's the big thesis that we went into, is this is a problem we need to solve. And it impacts employers more, and the more you start to look into the claims, work comp, it's 80 to 90% orthopedic. So it's a huge problem, and it's a huge time saver. I mean, you think of people that are our age or older, in their 40s and their 50s, and they're getting shoulder surgery. Mm-hmm. That's what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with heart attacks. That comes later in life. typically. And so getting good musculoskeletal health is what we think is the most important problem for employers to solve. If you have diabetic condition, you're overweight, that oftentimes you have an orthopedic visit in all of that concern, because you have joint problems because your joints aren't getting the nutrients that they need and you're overworking them. So the pressure on your joints is a lot. So you have knee pain and you have a diabetic concern. So there's a lot of ways that the healthcare system hits itself, but orthopedics is the most important part. And for hospital systems, health systems, it is the profit machine. It is where most of the money is made.
Well, I want to spend quite a bit of time on that, like some of the perhaps unnecessary surgeries, right? The frequency in that, and then obviously the price tag that's associated with that. The incentives around doctors being pushed into surgery because of those price tags. I think we'll cover that. Obviously, we'll cover soft tissue stuff, maybe your opinions on stem cells we were talking about earlier. But let's go back in your story, Sam, if you don't mind, because I want people to get to know you too. Okay. Obviously, you didn't just show up in the world and be found MD direct. So tell me a little bit of your history, college, career, education, where'd you grow up, all that good stuff.
Yep. Man. So I grew up in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, Wisconsin, kind of that area. I did not think I'd end up in this chair talking about benefits. Yep. That was kind of my career, and my life really revolved more around the health systems. So I started in healthcare finance. I went to college in the Twin Cities and was focused on finance. So that was really where health and finance for me met. I did consulting with a lot of providers around the country, and the projects that we were working on was, hey, here's $250 million of bad debt for a large health system. Go figure out why we have this debt. So then we'd go look at it line by line and figure out we didn't have the right process in place. We billed the insurance company wrong. You'd go back and improve processes. So I learned really quickly where the money was traveling in healthcare. Okay. Where was it orthopedics? What departments were making a lot of money? What surgeries, what procedures were doing really, really well, what didn't do really well. So that helped me, I think, give me a different view on things. My family, my dad's a physician, my grandpa's a physician, so we are all kind of a healthcare family. My brothers work in healthcare right now too, so unfortunately for our significant others, the dinner table was healthcare talk. I was going to
say, it's inescapable, right?
And you can't get away from it.
Out of curiosity, with two generations, that are physicians themselves, were you encouraged to explore that as a path? Or?
Yes.
Okay. You had to be,
Not
right?
pressured, but encouraged. Okay. I think the thing about a physician is they have a really good lifestyle in terms of they are helping people. They're doing a really good service. Like you and I were talking about earlier, it requires a lot of work, so it's a good profession. And I think for me, that was a good choice, but it just didn't match really what I wanted to do in college. Okay. And so that's why I went a different direction. My brothers, we all thought about it. I was pre-med at the beginning and then transitioned away. Okay. And some of the things I think with the industry kind of pushed me the wrong way. Just the nature of there's really always an answer for something that's wrong with you. That's not reality of what being a physician is. So you show up, is it knee surgery? Well, there's a lot of different opinions. It's actually pretty gray. So I think that certainty is kind of what they teach. I think some of that kind of
the certainty, obviously a doctor has a certain air of authority. We were talking about this earlier, right? You have that white lab coat.
For sure.
You have credibility, right? Yep. However, I think with that, the physician might have to presume I need to provide confidence and reassurance that I know exactly what's wrong with you.
You do.
Otherwise, you might not decide to do the thing that I'm suggesting, right? Yep. If I'm like, oh, it could be this or it could be that, I'll give you a 30% confidence level. But let's go ahead and cut it open to see. People are going to go, whoa, hold on. Like maybe that's not the best idea.
That's such a good insight because there is a bunch of studies out there of the confidence level of a surgeon or a physician and your outcome. So if you believe you're going to do well in surgery, and that often comes from the physician, then you will do better in surgery. That's been proven in a bunch of different studies.
Kind of placebo effect a little bit.
Yeah, there is a little bit of placebo, and then you're gonna do the treatments afterwards. Like, oh, I'm gonna get better, so you believe it. So there is that, and I think there's a bunch of amazing physicians out there, and I've worked with a bunch of them. So what I love is actually the partnership of kind of my role and what a physician does. Because I do a lot of the other stuff, and I can get into kind of my background, but really taking the financial lens and how it works operationally and getting people to the physician and then them doing what they do best. I think that's really the partnership.
Right, that physicians aren't great business people. That for some reason that seems to be the suggestion. I realize that's not always true, but they want to practice medicine at the end of the day, and they don't go to business school. They don't necessarily learn how to run an efficient operation because their mission is to fix people and to practice medicine and medicine alone. So they kind of need help, right?
They do.
Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for 3 main reasons. Number 1, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number 2, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number 3, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
They do, and just like, you and I need help, like in our businesses, we all have our specialties.
Yeah.
And really good clinicians sometimes aren't good at business, but that's why there are big consulting companies like the ones I work for.
Right.
They would help these physicians basically see as many patients as they could and optimize their schedule. And I think that's really important piece of healthcare is we all need everyone to do their job really well for it to work out. Okay. We need the best clinicians to do their best work, and we need somebody like me to help that, make it an efficient visit so you don't see them, you don't have 4 visits before seeing them, you go right to them. And that's really what we've tried to do is how can you make that operation efficient and get the physicians to do what they're best doing, which the word that we say a lot is practicing at your level.
Practicing at your level.
So your level. So if you're a physician, you're doing these types of behaviors. If you're a nurse, you're doing this types of behaviors. So it's basically trying to optimize your knowledge and what you're doing.
Okay, interesting. Well, so why don't we start about with the inception? Let's go back to the inception of MD Direct, right? Because you told me you were tracking down the money for these big systems and finding why these things, they had a bunch of bad debt. And then you start to get some insight into these money flows and maybe some of these operational inefficiencies. When did you go, hey, I actually want to turn this into a business and I'm going to bring in a partner and we're going to go do this? What would that look like?
Yeah, I've got some good memories of how that started, but really for me, it even started before we started the company. I started to work with one of the largest orthopedic groups in the country, and they did between 2,000 and 4,000 bundles at the time. I know that they've done 10 now, but they were by far the leader in a bundled payment, which is basically trying to take that fee-for-service model and move it into more of a value-based arrangement. So the way the bundle was set up was for every surgery, you'd get a set amount, say $25,000 for an outpatient total knee. They were required at 90 days to take all of the complication risk. So if something bad happened to you, you go for a surgery, you have an infection in the ER, you're not paying for it. The provider's actually going to pay for that and themselves. And so it's incentivizing the right care. So we thought at the beginning, this was the best vehicle to value-based care. So it incentivizes the provider, it incentivizes the employer. We're thinking this is going to be a great way. So we started the company with the thesis of bundled payments is going to be the answer. We're going to take these contracts to employers and to payers and say, hey, this is a group. They do super well. So we were months in, I'm starting this startup. I'm all excited. I'm wearing my Allbirds at these conferences and I'm super pumped up. So there was a conference that had a panel, and one of the panelists was a leader in a healthcare payer. They did a bunch of bundles with some of the groups I've been working with. So I was thinking, this is great. This is how it's going to work. We're gonna do this deal. And it's gonna be great. So I walked up to him afterward and gave him my pitch, and he was like, Sam, the biggest problem for us is not the bundled payment; it's the number of surgeries. We're seeing this vehicle, bundled payments, is driving the number of surgeries up rapidly. So that caught me off guard because we started this company and we jumped in pretty hardcore, and now we're like, our thesis is essentially wrong. So we had to flip and kind of go back to the drawing board and say, how do we fix this problem?
Well, so I want to dig into that a little bit. So I heard somebody the other day say, I want to double click on that. I'm going to double click on that real quick. So you say that you built it on this thesis, but the problem was there was far too much frequency, right? So the model created incentives for those doctors to do more surgeries because that's how they were getting paid. But that doesn't undermine completely that the bundled surgery, at least on the surface for that procedure, is less expensive. Yep. You already described how it optimizes outcomes because of the warranty or however they structured afterwards. So can we unpack some of the good and the bad and rebuild it into a perfect version of that? Because we don't abandon it altogether, right?
So you just described what we did.
Sweet. Okay.
So you nailed it.
Summary.
So we're done. So we looked at the bundled payment vehicle and said we want this as a part of our model, but it is not all we do.
Okay.
So we had to put in place, well, how do we solve this problem now of increasing orthopedic costs? So we dug into the claims and figured out what the problems were with this. And so the general thing that we found was an acceleration of surgery. So you may be getting surgery a little too early, because the way the incentive structure works in a bundled payment is you have you don't want a complication to happen. So if you have somebody that's healthier, they're not going to have a complication. So now there's a reason to say, okay, you tore your ACL. Well, you're going to do really well, Spencer, because you take care of your body, you're mobile, you're active. Well, we're going to do surgery on you. Maybe that's not the right path though for you.
Okay.
So we were saying, hey, how do we get Spencer, you onto a different path, a more conservative route that is evidence-based. It leverages treatments like injection therapy, high value physical therapy to get you better in a different way. So we reduce that need to rely on the bundle.
I see.
But if you are surgical, we're going to get you in the bundle.
Yeah.
Because it does work really, really well. Again, it incentivizes providers. And that's really what we want to do, is create that kind of perfect system.
Well, it sounds like your job is to sort of triage the necessity of the surgery itself, right?
Yep.
And then,
I mean,
it's almost like it's similar to a step therapy in pharmacy, right? Let's start with the least critical intervention, if you will, first, see if it works, or if there is evidence that this would be the most appropriate path. We start there. You might eventually end up down the path of surgery. That may be the outcome.
Yes.
But if you just go right to that, you don't explore what's possible prior to that.
Yep.
Okay. So what are some of the other things? So you mentioned, what was the type of physical therapy you said, or you had a term that you called it?
It's like high value physical therapy.
So what qualifies it as high value then?
So everything we try to do is an evidence-based treatment. So therapy where you're walking on a treadmill and stretching is not physical therapy. Okay. So we want to find treatments that work for you. So there's a bunch of data on what physical therapy treatments work. There's a bunch of groups that we know in different markets that do an excellent job. And so it's, instead of it being 6 weeks of PT, it's 1 or 2 visits and you are feeling much better. Really? You know very quickly in physical therapy if you're getting better or not. And that's something that we've seen with our patients, but it's leveraging the right treatment at the right time. That's really what we try to do. And I'm not the person making that decision because I'm not a clinician. What we found is having on the front end, triage is an awesome word. It's how do you triage where you are, what your injury is, and who's going to best take care of you. So we've put an orthopedic surgeon, board certified orthopedic surgeon who has 25 years or more of experience to say, in my history, what has worked? And then we send you onto that right treatment pathway, whatever it really is. It could be you need surgery tomorrow. Like you fully torn, nothing's going to help. Go that way. But we found that it reduces the number of visits, and that's what wins in the end. Before it took 8 visits, now it takes 4 on average. That's what we want.
So let's talk about the application of this right at the employer-based level, because obviously most of this audience is consultants who are working with employers, and if something is 5.7% of the GDP, obviously this is a significant portion of most employer plan spend. So we want to target this. So let's kind of drill it down to the application of an employer level. What does it look like for MD Direct to work with an employer? Tell me about that.
PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. But what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
About that.
Yeah, so we have a bunch of different ways to, we'll call it engage with an employer, and really what we're focused on is how can we get in front of an employee when they need it.
Okay.
So one of the models we really like is a direct primary care model. So if they have a DPC clinic, we will partner with that clinic and create that kind of clinical pathway. So something happens to that primary care provider, this is what's going on. Then what we're going to do is send it to one of our physicians, and our physicians will partner with them. We'll do a lot of education to try to get them engaged. But it's really at a higher level looking at, is orthopedic a problem for you? So we'll look at claims to say, is this something we can help you with? So we look at claims, we say, we'll baseline that against what we typically do. Mm-hmm. So is there a savings? Is there an ROI for you? And then we'll engage and say, hey, we want to institute a second opinion. We can do a lot of things with benefit design. So incentives for going towards us first versus going towards the traditional route.
Okay.
And we can meet employers at different stages. Some are really ready to jump in with 2 feet and go. And some are saying, hey, let's test this out. Let's send a few patients to you. Let's see how this goes. We're not sure, but we kind of like the concept. Yeah. Let's see how it goes.
And is this something that's like contracted on a PPM basis or an intervention basis? You don't have to go deep into your pricing, but kind of understand just the model itself if you could. Yeah, so
we do both.
Okay.
We do that. We originally went into a risk model, which is really complicated, which we are not doing that now.
Okay.
We have proven the ROI, and we can show you in the claims, but the risk model gets more complicated in severity, and that's a whole other kettle of fish. But we do PEPM or that individual basis, individual procedure. Again, our whole thing is can we impact your claims, and can we show you we're impacting claims? That's where we always end up.
I could see it very easily how you could draw a line between what you could potentially save in the interventions and the cost for what they're paying today, because there isn't really built into the system anybody that's looking at these and going, was this even necessary? Is this the right thing? A second opinion, like you described earlier. Would you call it a center of excellence, though? Is that what you've created as a center of excellence model then? Okay.
Yep. So we've center of excellence is one of the terms we use, and then we have a pathway that we try to make sure the center of excellence follows. So we'll contract with local groups to follow this center of excellence model, and what we try to do is we basically tee up the patient or the individual as to, hey, they're ready for this type of surgery, go to this center. They're partnering with us. We know, there's 20 physicians. We know the good few that you want to use because we have our own set of data that we look at on physician behavior. But we want to create that center of excellence, and a bundled payment is something that we would try to engage with them to say, hey, we want you to have some skin in the game as well.
Well, so with that bundled payment model too, then it's effectively going outside of the insurance model, correct? I mean, DPC already partitions the primary care side. You guys are partnering with those DPCs if you can. Then you're doing the bundled surgery over here, again, outside of that network-based arrangement. So does this need to be written into the plan document then?
Yeah, we do write in the plan document, and we have a bunch of different kind of languages that you can use based on how detailed you want to go into. Is it like required before every single surgery that they come see us, which some groups want to do? They want to say this, we want the second opinion to happen every time. Or is it just, hey, for every time they come see us, this is what the charge is? So we do work with plan documents quite a bit.
Okay. And so as we're applying this to like an individual, maybe we just have a hypothetical use case, right? Let's say I go out and played soccer this weekend for some reason, and I twist my ankle. I've got a very severe high ankle sprain. I now need to notify somebody within my employer, or maybe I went to a primary care physician and initially had a look at it, maybe went to urgent care. But when do you guys intervene? How do you get triggered to know that it's your job to step in at this point?
Yeah, so in a DPC model, it's really great because they typically go to the DPC.
Okay.
And so then we engage, the DPC then would send it to us. But if it's outside of a DPC environment, we have multiple ways. We do some marketing. We do incentives of it's free for employees to come talk to us.
Okay.
And it's immediate. So they get to talk with a board certified orthopedic surgeon that same day. So that incentivizes a lot of people to reach out. And again, it kind of builds slowly because at the beginning, people really don't know much about us. But then once they start hearing like, oh, this actually helped me. I liked this physician. This, made things move a lot quicker. We say sometimes we have the bat phone line to get you into a different appointment.
Yeah.
So maybe it takes you 6 weeks or 4 months to get into an orthopedist. Some of the good ones take a long time to get into. We can get you in a little earlier.
Okay.
And so we try to help people on kind of wherever they are in the journey. But if we can design a pathway, it would be, hey, come see us right away.
Okay.
And we do.
And then, so from like the consultant's perspective, right? Like, how do you help them identify, you know, obviously you might look at a claims report or some claims history, but how are you helping them identify employers that are going to be a good fit and ones that maybe just wouldn't see as a strong of an ROI for you? Like,
Yes.
is it just the prevalence of MSK claims themselves, or what else are you looking for?
Yeah, MSK is usually a good one. And then industry, so manufacturing, transportation, public entities, all we know for a fact have a bunch of MSK spend. So sometimes it's hard for some brokers to get data, to get like, hey, I can't get, you know, the breakdown between what MSK is versus cancer. If they can't, we can look at the population that they're working with and make some kind of overall assumptions based on the industry. We've got some data to say, this is typically what we think we can save. So we can go through some type of assessment to say this is who we think we can work with. But typically industry gives us a pretty good idea. And quite frankly, if people are older, you know, over a certain age, that's typically when the orthopedic conditions come out. We did an assessment for a company that was like an app company, a bunch of young people. We said, hey, there's not enough here for us. We're not going to do it.
Yeah, I was
because
gonna say,
young
what are the
people sitting in an
constraints?
office.
Is there geographic limitations for you, or even funding arrangements? Fully insured plans might not work so well.
Fully insured plans, it's more complicated.
Okay.
We do work with some fully insured plans, though. If you have a really good broker who wants to make this happen, they can make it happen. And so we love, basically, if we can find a group that is really incentivized and wants to be innovative, that's who we work with best, is somebody that says, you know what, we're thinking about doing this innovative approach. Can we put you guys into that? So they're thinking about going self-funding, or they are self-funding and they're putting some pharmacy benefit solutions. If they're thinking about those solutions already, that's usually a good candidate for us.
Okay.
If they're more on that like innovative side, because it does require some employee education for them to know who we are. You know, we're not a big health system. We don't have billboards around.
Right.
But we can work in any geographic location. That's the beauty of telemedicine. So we have a telemedicine offering and phone calls. We can go anywhere. And we have a bunch of connections with orthopedists around the country, so we can get partnerships with orthopedists kind of in any market.
Are you seeing consultants then actually structure or does help the employers design a plan that incentivizes this with like zero out of pocket as well? Yeah, I figured as much.
Yeah, so if you can get the financial incentive to the employees, that's a great way to see engagement tick up. And that's, you know, and a lot of the ones that we go to are already trying to do that with DPC. You know, they're trying to figure out how do we make it basically cheaper for them to go.
Yeah.
So, you know, working within the HSA rules and all of that stuff. So we've been able to design that plan around, hey, this is going to be better for you clinically, but also it's going to be, you know, next to nothing for you. So that's a good way to get people engaged.
I love the plans that are structured that way. And we do at Pareto, we do like an indication where we go through the employer's numbers and we show them sort of the distribution on a curve of where they might end up on the good side or the bad side. Yeah. And on both hypothetical ends of the spectrum, it's either zero claims, which is impossible, right? Or, you know, maximum liability claims where you hit your attachment and exceeded it. And we just show how unlikely both of those scenarios are. Yep. But what we're getting at, or where I'm going with this, is we're never going to have zero claims. We're never going to eliminate people utilize, and we don't want them to not utilize a doctor. The goal is just to get them to utilize it in the most efficient manner, and obviously the most cost effective with the optimal outcomes as well. Yeah. And so this is just iterating ourselves towards that. I suspect that you might struggle though a little bit sometimes because there are so many point solutions in our system, because there's so many opportunities in the margins there, that it's just like getting yourself sort of implanted in a healthcare plan and proving value. It takes a couple times, takes a little while to get some traction, and then there's an epiphany. Then there's an aha moment within the plan. Yes. So getting over that hump though, like, is that a marketing thing? Is that a communication thing for you? How do you really prove your value at the level of the employee so this starts to proliferate inside the plan?
So that's an awesome question. That's definitely what keeps me up at night. Is how do we basically tell the story of this is a high quality experience and this is going to benefit your employees, and there is a huge financial incentive. So we have a bunch of case studies that we can walk people through that show people that have taken, you know, kind of the more aggressive approach or the more specific approach can reduce their orthopedic spend by half. And there's big ROI numbers.
So by half.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, most of the groups will go in and say, this is how much we think we can improve your population. Here's a couple examples of us doing this in the past. And so we're really trying to make sure that that story and that message gets delivered to these employers so they can see, you can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and say, hey, that's where we're going. And what you said is a perfect comment around, we're not just denying care or delaying care. We're trying to get you better faster. We're trying to put your employees back in their seats and be productive.
Well, there's lanes, right? There's a primary care lane. There's the elective kind of procedure lane that you guys operate in. There's obviously emergency style care that's more severe and unpredictable. But if we can just be more efficient in each one of these lanes, rather than having them all sort of like murky and folded together in sort of an insurance model, fee-for-service model that really doesn't have much oversight, that's where you get all the leakage and the inefficiencies. I was going to ask you, was go back. I actually did want to talk about sort of the spread, if you will. You mentioned by half, but like give me some common procedures and some of the deltas that you're seeing. Because I imagine, and you don't have to pick the most extreme examples, but sort of common deltas of knee surgery at X in the traditional PPO model versus knee surgery in the bundle model as an example. Like tell me some of those. I like stats.
Good. So do I.
Okay, good.
That's my thing. So when we look at a group, we look at before what was happening to your employees and after. So we look at the specific codes of how many total knee surgeries, code 27447, did you have before and after us? So what we're finding is there's a huge shift in this relationship between total knees and a meniscectomy. So meniscectomy and a total knee are very different procedures, but they kind of go both at the
meniscectomy, I'm presuming meniscus, right? Okay.
So it's a meniscal repair. And total knee is about $25,000.
Okay.
And it's bone, you're taking out all of the joint, you're putting in metal and plastic. And so it's what we call an end stage surgery. This is kind of the end of the road. We are seeing a huge uptick in these types of surgeries. So one of the examples is I did an analysis of a company that had 10 total knees to every 1 meniscus.
Okay.
So it's super high.
That sounds off to me.
You're right.
Okay.
So a meniscectomy is the most common orthopedic procedure. We see the ratios better at like a 7 meniscectomy to 1 total knee.
And it was 10 to 1 total.
The other way.
Oh my God.
And so we're starting to see these total knee numbers go up more for a variety of reasons, as we talked about.
It can't only be financial, though obviously you can make more money, but why do you think they're going to the most extreme route? If it's not for the money, why else would you go that direction?
Well, I think there's this perception that this total knee surgery will be 100% fix.
Okay.
And I think a lot of clinicians are seeing this as like, you know what, we're going to do it eventually. We should just do it now. And eventually it could be in 10 years.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that acceleration of this treatment happening quite a bit. And I think that's where we're getting a little concerned.
Well, and that worries me. Excuse me. I had a buddy I think he was 37 at the time. Actually, I had a friend that just got a hip replaced, is in the military, but soccer player buddy got his knee replaced. And I think at the stage he was in and the severity of the pain he was at, and I don't know if he had any meniscus left. It was pre-arthritic or maybe he's arthritic. So like he had to go that route. But even then I think, God, he's 37. He's probably gonna have 2 to 3 more, not 2 to 3 more, but 2 to 3 total devices.
They
how
last
brutal
for 10
that
years.
surgery.
They last
for 10 years, right? And maybe on the high end you could get 15. Well, he's probably going to live to 70 or 80 years old. So that's 2 or 3 more. And just golly, to go to that extreme so early. Of course, they made that decision because they felt that was best in that circumstance. But man, like I wish that wasn't the case, right?
Well, and that's, I think the biggest thing we found is when you educate a patient or a member on this is kind of what you're looking at down the road, it helps them. So the average time a doctor has is like 7 minutes with the patient. So we can spend 20, 30 minutes and go through the data and the evidence and answer a bunch of questions and say, look, this is kind of what you're looking at. You have these 3 choices. And we, like, for example, there was a back patient that was scheduled for surgery by a neurosurgeon. They were going to do a pretty aggressive back surgery. So we said, our physician got on the phone with actually the patient and his wife and was like, hey, let's talk about this. So he said, you know what, there's a treatment that we can do that is a steroid, oral steroid. Your surgery's not for a couple of weeks. Let's just try it and see if it works. 80% relief. So they canceled the surgery. So it's just getting the treatments to these individuals. When you talk to them like a human being, like, hey, this is what you're looking at. These are the studies. A total knee surgery has 82% success rate. Here are the other things you can try. There's a injection regimen just going on that total knee, which is hyaluronic acid or PRP. It can delay a total knee from up to 7 to 10 years. And in some cases, like 30 years. I mean, we know people that are continually going back. It's a long-acting steroid, so you get an injection once every 6 months. And The beauty of that is if you have diabetes, it doesn't spike your insulin like a steroid injection would do. So it's just getting more clinical on what that solution actually is and getting that information to those patients and injured and members and everybody that's injured. That's the most important thing. And that's what we want to do, is just give you the ability to make a better decision.
Well, and as an ex-athlete, it seemed like when you were trying to perform at a high level and you got injured to a certain degree, surgery seemed to be the immediate, like, let's go right to surgery because we need to fix you to optimize level to get you back on the field, right? And I understand that mentality. Now, when I'm about to be 41 here in a couple of weeks, I look back and go, I look at surgery as usually should be the last resort. You know, not to say that you shouldn't and don't need surgery, but probably needs to be the farthest end of the spectrum, the last thing we explore. But like you said, let's look at everything downstream from that and at least try it first, even if it has just a slight possibility of improving pain or outcomes. Why not, if the side effects themselves are limited, why not start there, work our way to an eventuality of surgery if it's not indicated immediately. And that just gets to the question earlier we were talking about, like, what percentage of surgeries are unnecessary just on average, right? I mean, or even maybe if you want to pick a category, but I know it's a pretty high percentage.
Super high.
Right?
It's the best data that I've seen is anywhere between 33 and 40%
of just overall surgeries.
And most of it is what they say is non-evidence based.
Okay. So
there is a level of appropriateness, but it's not a fully, this is for sure a total knee. Your tear pattern is, it's a 10%, it should be 20%. It's just, there's kind of gray areas in surgery that I think are difficult, but really what we see is a lot of overutilization of services. And unfortunately, the fee-for-service world incentivizes these behaviors. So that has become the norm. And I've worked in a bunch of hospitals, and I know how hard it is to get off of a fee-for-service. I mean, that's 95% of the revenue. So it's really hard to say, hey, this is an easy fix, just do it. ACO, we're going to just incentivize. It's like, no, this is a huge, momentous shift. But we are seeing, it's not the money, it's the money. Whatever the incentives are, typically is kind of what the behavior is.
Absolutely.
And that's the hard thing is we want an objective view on what's going to be best for you. And that's why our doctors aren't paid to do surgery. They're not paid to, their opinions are just, we want you to get healthy the fastest. Because what we found is if surgery is right, you should be getting it tomorrow. I mean, that's the care model that we've used is the NFL.
Okay.
Because like Aaron Rodgers, for example, got injured a couple weeks ago. So on the sideline, there are 17 specialists. There's a knee, a hip. They're all
at an NFL game, there's
game.
17 specialists. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so you'll see them down there, and it's kind of fluctuates, but that's typically, there's an MRI machine in the stadium.
Okay, yeah.
So they go under and get an MRI, and what they do is they get a diagnosis right away and an opinion from an orthopedic surgeon who says, like, hey, this is what's going to get you better the fastest. Again, weighing the odds of, you want to get surgery again in your life? And I think that's what Aaron was worried about, was I don't want to keep getting surgery, so I got to find the right treatment pathway. So we got to find that right surgery pattern for them, but then how do we deliver that care model to you and me? How do we make sure that we can get that opinion right away and accelerate what we call the diagnosis? Because often what we see in claims is a general diagnosis. So knee pain. We want to go really detailed, and is it a meniscal tear? So sometimes an MRI actually relieves a lot of that indecision at the beginning. So if we can get a diagnosis, then we can start making, like you said, do you want this treatment, what is actually going to work for you, rather than just saying, hey, we're going to try physical therapy or we're going to try injections. Like, no, what one will actually work? And let's get a clinician who's super educated to make that decision.
Well, yeah, especially with that second opinion, right? When somebody doesn't have any incentives at all at the direction it goes other than the outcome for the patient themselves, you can give a little bit more of an objective and honest assessment of the situation, right? Like, and Aaron Rodgers is an extreme example because there's a lot of money at stake getting that guy back on the field, right? You or I might have a obviously different desire in terms of an outcome for our lives in this stage as an Aaron Rodgers might have. But either way, we want to have some specificity of what's going on and at least a recommendation that we feel is a trustworthy recommendation for what we should do. Now, you were telling me offline, when I want to go down this path a little bit, you think we might get towards a model or towards a world where surgery isn't all that common anymore. Like, there might be interventions that lower the necessity for surgery altogether. So what gives you that sentiment? Why do you think that might be coming? And this may be 20 years, 30 years down the road.
Yeah, and this is
but that's an interesting angle.
This is definitely me.
You're curious, yeah.
So the whole field of what's called biologics, which is kind of those injection treatments where we're going into the cells themselves and trying to help them repair. And so when you go at kind of a scientific level, and this is not, my area of expertise, but I've been around this for a long time, we're seeing there's a lot of treatments that are working really, really well. And stem cells is a word that gets a lot of, it's all over the place, and there's some people are really against it and some people are really for it. So stem cells, what the whole goal is how can we get your cells in your body to regenerate, to be healthy? So we want your meniscus to repair itself. That's so the body can do that naturally. How do we help in that process? So there are ways that can do these types of treatments. We'll call it stem cell therapy right now, which is to culture and modify the cell and make sure that you can put it back in. And so countries like Colombia have a bunch of research right now where they are doing some more aggressive stem cell treatment. So in the US, we've got a lot of restrictions around what you can and can't do in terms of modifying cell behavior. And so that's, I think, a really sensitive point is in the US, we have this thing. And I think the idea comes from, we don't want to copy you and I and have two of us running around, which is good for everyone. Because I think one of you and one of me, at least for my wife, she's like,
I can get more done.
But that's kind of the theory is like, they want to go down that path.
But that's obviously an extreme example. But that is that really generally why the guardrails are in place? Is because we're worried about cloning? I mean, is that really what
I think that's some of the concern, and it's a really complicated topic. And so what we're finding is, in my view, is like in the future that will be overcome with the right science. Because what we're hearing and what we're seeing with some of these other countries is there is a really high success rate if you're able to take a healthy cell in your knee, your meniscus, repair it, add a bunch of more cells. We're talking millions and millions of cells, and put it back in and see if they can regenerate on their own and aid in that process. It's really, really successful. And we're talking tears, significant. And a lot of athletes, again, athletes are usually at the forefront of orthopedic treatment, are doing this and are traveling. PRP used to be something that we didn't do here. That's where Kobe did it in Germany, I think it was. But now you can do PRP here. You can do it, and it's not approved. Hyaluronic acid is approved by payers.
Well, PRP is not approved here, but you can do it.
You can do it. So we can help. Obviously, we help clinics kind of set this treatment up and say, hey, this person's a good candidate. And they have a bunch of positives. And, the beauty of those treatments is they're not invasive. So they're not cutting you open. And so there aren't that kind of risk of surgery. So I do think that field will really take off. Once we can kind of figure out, hey, what's the science and does this really work? And like you said earlier with ours, it's getting the data back to saying, hey, this works. And that's really kind of the tough part, I think, is getting the right data back.
Well, and that's what sucks too is, I use that technical term, sucks, is that when the data suggests something, right, and you can point to it and it's very clear, this is the recommendation. Doesn't mean that's always the choice that's made, right? There's other incentives, there's other forces that are opposing that, right? And so like data-based, clinical-based, evidence-based outcomes, we'd all like to say that 100% of the time that's the reason a decision made. And I realize we all are aware that that's not the case. But where is MD Direct evolving towards, right, in your opinion, if we can kind of look towards the future a little bit? Love what you're doing. I love at least what you've described to me. I think it makes a lot of sense from a financial perspective and an outcomes perspective. But is it more of just an expansion of awareness of what you're doing? Is it an expansion into other categories? What does the future look like?
So we really look at specialist care as having the most opportunity for improvement. It's really where a lot of the money is spent. And we think there's a lot of unbelievable clinicians out there that are doing amazing work. And it's how do we bring that care pathway to you and I so we can get better really quickly. So we are right now solving the orthopedic kind of problem. We're looking at how can we take orthopedics and partner with these other models, get the engagement, and get this clinical model figured out. And then we want to take this into other specialties. Because we think, rapid diagnosis and treatment is just the way this should be. So how do we get that model? And, we have some predictive analytics that we're doing to try to make a better diagnosis. So it's really taking that model and figuring out what works. Again, the traditional healthcare model isn't designed for efficiency, unfortunately, for you and me. The efficiency really is for the physicians, for billing insurance companies. That's their primary goal, which I worked in that system for a really long time. And there's definitely some positives and negatives to it. So we're trying to say, hey, what is the best clinical model and how we deliver that to you and I? How do we help you with your knee problem and make it get better as fast as we humanly can?
Went on the predictive route, predictive analytics, but what about, I know obviously wearables are becoming more prevalent. Everybody nowadays is wearing those rings or the wristbands to track their sleep and their steps and their heart rate and blood sugar and all that. So what role does that type of data play in what you guys are doing?
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans, and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
Yes, so we have kind of a new AI program that we are working with and we're piloting. And it really is, how do we take some of that data and get that information into the physician's hands to make a different decision and change the behavior of a patient? So early notification of a problem is kind of what the whole goal of a lot of those programs are. How do we know, hey, your gait is off a little bit? I know there's a lot of companies working on that right now. Your gait's off. It might be because something's wrong with your knee or you're not standing up straight or whatever the problem is. Let's identify that early so we don't end up in the surgery route. So we get that as early as possible. And so that's really where I think data is going to help, is if we can integrate that into making a different clinical decision. The problem with kind of these early solutions that we've seen is we're not changing the behavior of you and I. We're just saying, hey, this is an interesting fact, but we're not getting you to make that change in your daily life, which that's really where the rubber hits the road is, do you get a back brace and are you trying to stand up straighter or are you actually losing weight? Like orthopedics, weight is such a big thing. Are you losing the weight or are you making changes in your daily life? And I think what we've noticed is physicians do a really good job of getting people to change behavior. They're really good at building that narrative. And so how can we arm them with the data to make that behavior change? That's really what we think is the important thing.
Well, behavior change is really the crux of it, but they're getting a behavior change in a situation that's acute where there's already a problem, right? Like, how do we get it to where we're downstream 10, 20 years from the problem, can identify, gait is a great example. My wife the other day told me, hey, when you walk, I don't know if you realize, but the foot is pointed a little more outward. And she was just saying, oh, it's like endearing or it's cute the way you walk. And I'm going, wait, well, what's wrong with my gait? Like, why do I walk that way? What should I correct? Like, that's how my mind thinks, right? And but I'm thinking about, well, will that impact my hip 20 years from now because I'm walking awkwardly, or my ankle? Everything's up from the foot and the toes, right? So like the entire chain. And so just kind of personalizing the angle I was going. But how do we impact behavioral change at a population level, way downstream from, there's not a problem yet, but we know how to keep you from having that problem. You said weight is a big component of that. I would agree 100%. I think the majority of these things probably revolve around poor health in general, right? Do you have an estimate perhaps of musculoskeletal injuries? How many of them might be just simply preventable as a result of chronic disease states or over obesity or anything?
I mean, the majority of them.
The majority
of them,
you'd say
for
the majority.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, because, so when you look at risk factors for surgery, the number one thing is weight. Weight, okay, that leads to more complications. It leads to a much more difficult surgery. A lot of people have pain because of weight. So that is, unfortunately, that's really where orthopedics the rubber hits the road, is weight. So the decisions that you and I make every single day, what am I eating? What am I doing? What mechanically, how am I walking? My mom kept saying stand up straight when I was growing up. I didn't, because how I slouched my shoulders, but that has had an impact on me and some of my shoulder. I'm more forward, so I have some more shoulder problems. I have a partially torn rotator. So all of these things have impacts on you. And really what's helped me is just that information, knowing, and I may not make that decision right now, but if it becomes more of an issue and I have somebody kind of telling me, we have a partnership with Anytime Fitness, and we're trying to do that early identification and take a lot of your nutrition, your exercise, and build that preventive model before we get to this orthopedic. Because I think in terms of employee health and benefits, that would be a great thing to offer your employees is, here's how you get better and you don't have to go to a hospital. These are the strategies, just know about them, and we're going to pay for it for you. And it helps incentivize that behavior change. And, when I've changed my diet, I feel better, I'm more productive. So these things have an impact on all of us. Orthopedics, it's 50% of people have some kind of orthopedic condition. I mean, I'm thinking about, things all the time.
Yeah, I'm literally like, what hurts on me right now is a moment. And they're usually little nagging little pains, right? Or just discomfort, or, the posture is a big one, right? How you sit during the day, like how tight. That's why I like to go to the gym at the end of the day, because I just get to undo some of the damage I know I'm doing to myself, and at least to reset the baseline for tomorrow so I'm not getting worse. But I do think about, well, what if I didn't do that on a daily basis? And what if I went years without going to the gym and trying to restructure myself and loosen things up? Yeah. How bad of a condition would I be? Now amplify that with weight gain. And you can see, I almost look at what sort of discomfort are people in generally all the time, right? When those things linger and when they get really bad. And then it leads to these types of interventions.
And the thing that we've noticed is you don't really know you're kind of in that much pain. You're like basically the fish doesn't know they're swimming in water. You don't know you're in that much pain until you get somebody who's like, hey, you could, there's a fix for that problem. And I'm Norwegian, Scandinavian, so I kind of stuff things down. So it always comes out too late. Where I'm like, oh, I should take care of this. And that's kind of my nature. And I think a lot of the people that you talk to who, like, oh, it'll work itself out later. But what I found is, I actually do need to figure some of this stuff out and go see a doctor.
I don't know how many times I work through joint discomfort or a little bit of I've got tightness in a forearm right now. I'm just, in a few weeks, it'll probably just go away. And then it doesn't. And you're like, that's
Which typically that stuff does work out. And as an athlete, you're probably really body aware. So you're aware of your body, which is a really good thing. And so you can kind of tell, and it impacts you. And that's, as an athlete, I think they're generally more body aware. I'm kind of the same way. I'm thinking about things. But I
imagine people are listening right now or in their car. Or,
unfortunately.
My shoulder does hurt now that you mention it.
Well, and the thing that I want to give the confidence to people is there is typically something you can do. There are a bunch of either physical therapists who are doing an awesome job, or there's something that we can help you get better. And that's out there. It's just having the confidence to admit it and then call somebody is part of the thing we have to deal with. And educating people on this, you can get better, you can do a lot of these things, is a huge component of kind of our engagement model. Is, if you have knee pain, maybe see somebody today versus waiting until it gets to be a big problem. So how do we help people learn that actually saves money in the long run? And I think, you've talked about this, the whole financial model, how expensive healthcare is. Sometimes it's in our best interest to just not do anything because we don't want to spend $500 on a visit. So it's expensive. So that's kind of where the problem with healthcare is going, is the more expensive it gets, the less we're going to actually change the things we need to change.
And then it's going to get more expensive, right?
Then
it gets more. Well, why don't we land the plane here, Sam? We've probably been talking, if Nathan's checking the cameras more than once, that means we've talked over an hour. But why don't we do this? Let's talk, just laid out there kind of, not just within your realm, but the big picture of healthcare of the future, where you think we're going. That's a broad question that I typically ask everybody because it leaves it open to any type of answer. And then, we'll ask your closing thoughts before we wrap up. So where are we going with this thing we call the U.S. healthcare system, man? Good and bad.
I think the financial pressure is starting to mount on people, where I think we're finally going to start seeing people take the jump into making a bigger change.
Okay.
So in my kind of small career, my career of trying to figure out how to make a change, the financial pressure hasn't been very high. But now we're starting to see, there's a big delta between these costs are really going up. It's becoming unsustainable for employers. It's a line item that just keeps going up, and you have really no way to make that cost. So I think now the incentives are starting, and people are getting more well educated. I mean, this podcast, I love what you're doing here, because this is giving people information to make a change and to say we actually can make that impact instead of just trusting it'll handle itself. It's like educating yourself on actually what the problem is. That's a huge component. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
When I appreciate that, and all I was going to say is like, what I really want to be able to is let people in on the conversation a little bit. These conversations are having in conference rooms at brokerages and with individual select employers. But these are things that people should be aware of in general, right? Like, why wouldn't somebody be aware of the solutions out there? It may not apply to everybody, but if you don't know what's out there, then you can't make a change, or you can't actually make a decision to do something about it. And I really think that's what it comes down to, is if you arm people with the right information, the real information, I do generally trust that most people will make the correct decision if that's the case.
Yeah, and the beauty too of, I'd say, the provider community is these clinicians want to do a good job. They are kind of in a system that they're usually not happy with. So they want to deliver the best care and treatment to all their people. So that's really what we're saying we think we should. You got the providers who are incentivized to do a good job, and you have kind of the employers over here. Let's just get everybody to kind of meet in the middle and figure out what works best.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. Why don't we do closing thoughts, Sam? This could be anything you want to talk about, but I know you traveled down from Minneapolis, had some other things in town, but I appreciate you making time for me. But I just want to give you the floor of what you want to say before we jump. Yeah,
well, I appreciate kind of what you guys are doing. I love working with people that are innovative. And so it's those people that I think are the real innovators. It's the people that are making decisions for their employees to say, hey, we're going to do something different. Those are the true innovators. Those are the people that are making the tough decision. That's who we love working with. And I think those are the people I just want to commend them and say thank you, because I think those are the people that are going to push healthcare forward. Yeah. You and I are we're trying, but it really requires that type of person. I really think those are some of the most innovative people. And if you're innovative, like, that's who we love working with. Yep. So you can reach out, to me on LinkedIn. We'd love to see. And really, we just want to see, is this possible? We're not going to come in. We just want to see, is your scenario perfect for us, or does this work out? Are we going to provide benefit? Because I think that's just how we.
When I look at what you do, and it's interesting that you say that, because it is a call to action to innovative consultants and employers out there. But I look at what you do, and again, I don't intimately know your business model, but I look at what you do and say, though, this shouldn't be innovative. This should be normal, right? And so what my goal would be able to help take some things like this that do today seem like they're innovative and go, let's apply this everywhere, because it just makes so much damn sense, if you excuse my French. So that's what the goal of these conversations too is, like, let's take cutting edge today, and 3 or 5 years from now, make it the norm, because it is better for everybody involved.
That's why I love what you guys do here. I mean, that mentality, I think, is what's going to drive everything forward.
Well, let's do it together, man. Well, Sam, I appreciate you. We'll obviously have a second version of this conversation at some point down the line, but thanks again for making the effort. Great to host you. Great to get to know you, and we'll talk soon, man.
That sounds great.
All right.